It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood once again. Here we are, out here in front of our sanctuary. And the neighborhood is rich with birds and trees, with the people who we are sharing our space with, from the folks at I Help. Great sun that Arizona has in such abundance. But it's more than that. It's not just all those things. It is so much more. I'm Fred Wooden. I am the interim minister for Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation. And whether you are a member, a friend, a visitor, you are our neighbor today. And you make this neighborhood a beautiful neighborhood. So let's celebrate that and the liberating, animating, agitating faith that is Unitarian Universalism as we worship together. And so we begin our hour of worship with the lighting of our chalice, which Barbara Face will now help us do.
Thank you, Reverend Wooden, and good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara, and I'm honored to be the lay presence in our virtual pulpit today. Please join me in saying our chalice lighting blessing. You are invited to light your own chalice as I light mine. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love, which calls us to work for justice.
Thank you, Barbara. Good morning, everyone. My name is Haley, and I'm the Faith Formation Assistant. If you have children in your house right now, now is the time to call them in front of your device. And while we wait for the kids, here are a few announcements. The Eastview U group is having a social night on March 25th, which is a Thursday. And the Green Sanctuary Garden meets on Thursdays from 8 to 9:30 a.m. The Food for Life and Planet meeting is taking place on Friday the 19th. And the Environmental Action Team takes place this Monday, the 15th at 6 p.m. via Zoom. If anyone is interested in the results of the Environmental Action Team survey, they can contact the group for that information. If you love to sing and miss singing with others, especially with a choir, Katie, our music director, invites you to join in on the fun and attend the virtual choir experience that she is co-leading with Benji Messer, the music director from UUCP. They will be meeting on Zoom for the next 2 Wednesdays from 7 to 8 p.m., learning Handel's iconic Hallelujah chorus to debut on Easter morning. For more information, you may contact Katie at musicdirector@vuu.org. Please refer to this week's and next week's happenings for more information as well as Zoom links. After the service, you will be given the option to join a breakout room. And today's prompt is, when you're in spiritual need, is there something you depend on? If you're new to us, after the service, we would love it if you stayed where you are right now on your computer to meet with Reverend Wooden and some members of our congregation to ask questions and to generally just to get to know us as a small group. All you have to do is not accept the invitation that will pop up and invite you to join the breakout room, but you can stay right where you are and you'll be in the right place to meet us. This week's pastoral care associate is Melissa Bush, and you can reach them via email at pastoralcare@vuu.org. To send a private Zoom chat, you may click on their name in the message window, but please remember that the chat is restricted during prayer and meditation as well as the service, so please feel free to post/chat your joys and concerns before or after those parts. And finally, this week's Time for All Ages is about James Weldon Johnson's song, and I'll just let it speak for itself.
Sing a Song, How Lift Every Voice and Sing, Inspire Generations, by Kelly Starling Lyons, illustrated by Keith Mallett. Before you were born, a girl learned a song. Her principal, James Weldon Johnson, and his brother, John Rosman Johnson, had written the hymn for a celebration of President Abraham Lincoln's birthday. The girl wanted to make them proud. She hummed the song on her way home from school. She practiced it as she did her chores. On the big day, February 12th, 1900, she was a part of a choir 500 strong. Back straight, head high, heart and mouth wide open, she sang, "Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty." And she kept on singing as she grew up. She taught it to her students when she became a teacher, and she sang it to her husband as they journeyed from Jacksonville, Florida to a new life in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She sang it when she rocked her baby boy to sleep. It was a part of her she wanted to pass on. And you know what? The little boy learned that song. One day he stood in the choir loft and gazed at the glowing faces. Back straight, head high, heart and mouth wide open, he sang, "Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea." He kept on singing. He sang it when he came back from World War II and faced discrimination. He sang it when he joined the NAACP. He sang it with his wife to his baby daughter as he rocked her to sleep. It was a part of him he wanted to pass on. And you know what? His little girl learned that song. Then came the day that broke the nation's heart. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. The next morning, she saw her teacher cry. Sobs replaced singing, then whispers and silence. Who would lead them now? The song whispered an answer. Back straight, head high, heart and mouth wide open, she sang. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. And she kept on singing. She sang it at the protests for equal rights and when she and her friends were jailed. She sang that song in her heart each time she won or lost a case as a lawyer. She sang it to her baby boy as she rocked him to sleep. It was a part of her she wanted to pass on. And you know what? Her little boy learned that song. Every family reunion opened with that anthem. He sang it because he had to at first. Sing a song full of hope that the present has brought us. But he kept on singing. He sang it at his college graduation and when he opened his first business. He sang it at rallies to stand up against racism. And he sang it when he rocked his daughter to sleep. That was a part of him he wanted to pass on. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. And you know what? That song is a part of you. Sing when you score a victory. Sing when tough times get you down. Sing and think of all the people who sang before you. Keep singing, keep pushing, keep passing it on. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you, Haley. What a beautiful reminder how important it is to sing and how powerful it is. And a great introduction to sing together. In lieu of Women History Month, I have selected music from various women composers. Our first hymn, number 346 in our gray hymnal, if you have it, is by Carolyn McDade, who describes herself simply as a woman of faith seeking with others to touch what matters. For over 3 decades, Carolyn has brought circles of women together to sing songs rooted in women's experiences, songs that helped us deepen our human consciousness and understand ourselves as part of a living planet, and songs that forward social justice, weaving together the spiritual and the political. Over the years, she has organized 13 recording projects that grew out of these singing circles. Thousands of activist women and professional musicians have touched into these circles and these projects. The depth of all of their living, both profound and ordinary, stirs and sustains in her music. Please join in singing Carolyn's song, a UU favorite, "Come Sing a Song with Me," a song about the need to support and live life together.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song.
Thank you,
Oh,
Katie. Barbara, would you lead us in our welcome now?
yes, thank you. And welcome everyone to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation. Thank you so much for joining us this morning as we are made whole by your presence. We're so glad you're here to worship with us, and we welcome you no matter your age or able-bodiedness, your spiritual beliefs or religious background, no matter your family, your economic status or political affiliation, no matter who you love. Believe us when we say you are welcome here. Everyone is welcome in this community. Wherever you are on your life's journey, we welcome you to this circle of love and community and to this sacred space. And as Haley said, we do offer a special welcome to anyone who is new to us and curious about Unitarian Universalism and Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation and has chosen to join us this morning. We're so pleased you're here, and we encourage you to stay after the service to chat with Reverend Fred and Nancy. And in our virtual pulpit today is our interim minister, the Reverend Dr. Fred Wooden. The title of his sermon is Standing in Need, which is his fourth sermon on the James Weldon Johnson literary rendering of the African American experience of the Bible. And today it's about the parable of the prodigal son. If you missed any of the previous sermons, don't worry, you can catch up on them by going to our YouTube channel. All you have to do is type in and the search bar for Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and all the recent sermons will be there so you can get caught up. Wow, so this week we acknowledge the 1-year anniversary of the World Health Organization announcement that COVID-19 had become a world pandemic. I never anticipated we would have experienced an entire year of masks, social distancing, lockdown, and so much human loss. It's hard to even look back at the journey, as it seems we've lived a lifetime in just 12 months. I feel lucky and so grateful that I personally have not contracted COVID. And yesterday I received the second vaccine. But of course, the world pandemic was just the tip of the iceberg of the stuff of the past year. The historians will have much to analyze and hopefully help us learn how to do things differently and how to love and accept each other more fully. So the reminders of redemption and respect and forgiveness that are woven into the prodigal son parable seem timely given all that we have experienced this year. I'm very much looking forward to hearing Reverend Fred's thoughts about it. As for me, I'm drawn to the plight of the elder son in the parable. He has a minor role, but I can so relate to his disappointment, resentment, and perhaps jealousy. He chose the path of obedience, and in the end, he didn't feel rewarded for his filial piety and envied the extravagant welcome home of his wayward brother. I can relate to the feelings that may have coursed through his mind beyond the defensiveness that he voices to his father. I imagine internally he was feeling agony and anger. How does one repair such a rift in one's soul? How does one set aside all the resentment and lightly and happily join the celebration of the returning son? I think it is this kind of suffering the Buddha observed, the suffering we create. I have my own prodigal story, but it's less dramatic and nevertheless has stuck with me, these many years. It goes like this. I returned home late on a Saturday afternoon after spending the night at a sleepover at Cindy's house, happy and tired and full of myself for having been with my friends for an overnight. The kitchen was in complete disarray, which was not an unusual state in my family. There were 4 of us kids. I was the eldest with 3 younger brothers and all of us close in age. Obviously, my brothers had had a play day of their own and the kitchen was in shambles. No matter, I thought. I had a great time with my friends and was making my way to my bedroom to crank up Tiny Dancer by Elton John when my father barked at me to do the dishes. Ha! I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I didn't make the mess. And besides, it's not even my day to be the responsible kitchen kid. I whined as much to my father. But Dad, I wasn't even here. I didn't eat here last night. I wasn't even here today. I shouldn't have to clean up the mess. Quicker than I thought possible, he calmly replied, yes, but you're going to eat here tonight and tomorrow, so get cracking on those dishes. Well, I had no comeback and so dutifully did as he instructed, but oh, I was seething. So many tears of injustice filled the dishwater pan. I was beside myself with bitterness at the unfairness of it all. I no longer remember, but undoubtedly I gave them all the silent treatment in punishment, which always only backfires and exacerbates the separation. Well, as you see in my story, I flipped the roles a little bit, but it does illustrate that for me, this is the struggle, letting go of perceptions that someone else is getting my just rewards. We witness that same struggle in our state and in the US as a whole. The assumption that some other group is getting more than another group, and so on and so on. It's endless and petty and certainly doesn't move the moral arc closer toward justice for all. So yeah, I really feel for the prodigal son's older brother and his predicament. It's hard to swallow one's expectations and pride and be open and welcoming to the newly returned or newly arrived. It seems we all have much to learn from this age-old parable. Thank you. Reverend Wooden?
Well, I had some great words prepared for the offering, and then I saw these phenomenal sunflowers in our garden. And it occurred to me there's a great symbol in that, because a sunflower of this size, all of them started with just a tiny seed that if you put it in your mouth and cracked it, you could eat in a half a second. And I'd like to think that if you don't want to imagine and think about money, you should think about seeds. That when you contribute to VUU, you're planting seeds that would grow 100-fold. There's another biblical reference all by itself. But the point here is that you don't know what's going to grow until you plant the seed. You can't hold on to the seed and expect something to grow. And our gifts of time and commitment, and yes, money, are the seeds from which things grow. Not all things turn into beautiful sunflowers. Sometimes as I turn around, you can see vegetables growing, and sometimes they're just plants anywhere. But the point here is that when you put something in the ground, literal or figurative, something can grow. So I want you to go and do that. Here's how you can do it each and every week. You can just click, you can just text, you can put something in the mail, but you are planting a seed every time. And the garden that as Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation will not only grow, it will feed and bless not only the one who planted, but many more. Make your seed flower by giving to us in the best way you can. Thank you.
Now is the time in our service where we take a moment to center ourselves. This morning, let's take a moment to feel first the need we have endured this past year, And second, the love and gratitude in our hearts for those we love, those we feel safe to be vulnerable with, and those who have comforted us. How precious is the hand that supports us. Let's take a deep breath and have a moment of silence and reflection. If there is one thing this pandemic and past year has shown us of is the need for one another. When I am frightened, number 10, 12, 1012, and our teal hymnal, if you have it, is written by Shelley Jackson Denham. She is a beloved UU music director who led from the 1980s to 2013 when she passed. She has written many songs in our UU hymnals, and in lieu of honoring those who support us and the courage that it takes to ask for help, let's sing her beautiful hymn together, When I Am Frightened.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me? Stand by me willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me? Comfort me tenderly. Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
This would be a time of prayer in many congregations and communities, and it is for ours too, although perhaps a little differently. In fact, I'll be talking about prayer for Unitarian Universalists in my sermon today, so I don't want to give it all away right now. But to get ready for that, I'm going to remind you of the three basic parts of every prayer ever said by anyone everywhere. Stop. Look. Listen. Stop thinking. Look. around. Listen to the world beyond your head. Try to be present to the world as it is and as you are. Because no matter how wounded, how burdened, how frightened, how lonely, how skeptical, how hopeful, how blessed, the person you are is needed right here and right now. That is the promise and the premise of this liberal faith we seek to practice, that every one of us is needed just as we are. That may be hard to believe some days, but if for a moment here and now you can believe it, you will have worshiped. Katie, can you gather us back into song?
Yes, thank you, Reverend Fred. When Reverend Fred shared what we'd be talking about, I immediately thought about sharing this next song. Both my husband and I were diagnosed with ADD, attention deficit disorder, when we were kids. Once I reached adulthood, I was blessed to work with a naturopath who helped me get off the ADD medication that I had experienced several poor side effects on, and taught me to change my diet, improve stress management, my sleep, and lifestyle. However, it is challenging to live and achieve the perfection that my diagnosis requires. So, after the birth of our daughter Lucy, when our diet, sleep, lifestyle, and such goes haywire from having our first baby, we decided to embrace our ADD in the form of writing a song about it. Our imperfections are what make us unique, and embracing them helped us let go of the shame and stress associated with it. Please enjoy our song. May it remind you that you too are much more than your imperfections, that you are enough just who you are right now. This is the ADD song.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it is, I don't know where I put it. I know I have to go, but I can't leave without it. I'm running out of time, where do I need to be? I'm quickly moving sideways, these shoes look good on me. I hope you still love me when I'm spacey. I promise you there's still a lot to me. I live and I laugh, I learn and I love, and I live and I laugh, I learn and I love. My world is opposite than the average CEO's. I'll stop to hear your story, I'll stop to smell the rose. I see my life in color, I hear the sounds in song. By cookie cutter standards, I may daydream too long. I hope you still love me when I'm spacey. I promise you there's still a lot to me. I live and I laugh, I learn and I love, and I live and I laugh, I learn and I love.
I'm in downtown Phoenix to share James Weldon Johnson's fourth poem in his book, God's Trombones. It's about the prodigal son. And I thought I'd come down here so you could get a flavor for the kind of town he thinks of when he mentions Babylon, a place of entertainment, of diversion, of danger. Now, I don't know if downtown Phoenix is anything like ancient Babylon, but it seemed like an appropriate place to read this particular story. Young man, your arm's too short to box with God. But Jesus spake in a parable, and he said, a certain man had two sons. Jesus didn't give this man a name, but his name was God Almighty. And Jesus didn't call these sons by name, but every young man, everywhere, is one of these two sons. And the younger son said to his father, he said, Father, divide up the property and give me my portion now. And the father, with tears in his eyes, said, Son, don't leave your father's house. But the boy was stubborn in his head and haughty in his heart, and he took his share of his father's goods, and he went into a far-off country. There comes a time when every young man looks out from his father's house, longing for that far-off country. And the young man journeyed on his way, and he said to himself as he traveled along, this sure is an easy road. Nothing like having the rough furrows behind my father's plow. Young man, smooth and easy is the road that leads to hell and destruction. Downgrade all the way. The further you travel, the faster you go. No need to trudge and sweat and toil. Just slip and slide and slip and slide till you bang up against hell's iron gate. And the younger son kept traveling along till at nighttime he came to a city, and the city was bright with the nighttime like day. The streets all crowded with people, brass bands and string bands a playing. And everywhere the young man turned, there was singing and laughing and dancing. And he stopped a passerby and he said, Tell me, what city is this? And the passerby laughed and said, Don't you know, this is Babylon, Babylon, that great city of Babylon. Come on, my friend, and go along with me. And the young man joined the crowd. Young man, you're never lonesome in Babylon. You can always join a crowd in Babylon. Young man, you can never be alone in Babylon. Alone with your Jesus in Babylon. You can never find a lonesome place to go down on your knees and talk with your God in Babylon. You're always in a crowd in Babylon. And the young man went with his newfound friend, and he bought himself some brand new clothes, and he spent his days in the drinking dens, swallowing the fires of hell, and he spent his night in the gambling dens, throwing dice with the devil for his soul. And he met up with the women of Babylon. Oh, the women of Babylon, dressed in yellow, purple, and scarlet, loaded with rings and earrings and bracelets, their lips like a honeycomb dripping with honey, perfumed and sweet-smelling like a jasmine flower. And the jasmine smell of the women of Babylon got in his nostrils and went to his head, and he wasted his substance in riotous living. In the evening, in the black and dark of the night, with the sweet-smelling women of Babylon, and they stripped him of his money, and they stripped him of his clothes, and they left him broke and ragged in the streets of Babylon. Then the young man joined another crowd, the beggars and lepers of Babylon, and he went to feeding swine, and he was hungrier than the hogs, and he got down on his belly in the mire and mud and ate the husks with the hogs, and not a hog was too low to turn up his nose at the man in the mire of Babylon. Then the young man came to himself. He came to himself and said, "In my father's house are many mansions. Every servant in his house has bread to eat. Every servant in his house has a place to sleep. I will arise and go to my father." And the father saw him afar off, and he ran up the road to meet him. And he put clean clothes upon his back and a gold chain around his neck. And he made a feast and killed the fatted calf and invited the neighbors in. Oh, sinner, when you're mingling with the crowd in Babylon, drinking the wine of Babylon, running with the women of Babylon, you forget about God and you laugh at death. Today you've got the strength of a bull in your neck, and you've got the strength of a bear in your arms. But some of these days, you'll have a hand-to-hand struggle with bony death, and death is bound to win. Young man, come away from Babylon, that hell border city of Babylon. Leave the dancing and gambling of Babylon, the wine and whiskey of Babylon, the hot-mouthed women of Babylon. Fall down on your knees and say in your heart, "I will arise and go to my Father." You know, in some ways, that's probably the most conventional sounding poem of the collection that I'm sharing with you. It dates back to 1926, and it itself reflects back earlier on sermons that James Weldon Johnson heard in his youth and was turning into poetry. Of course, he didn't finish the parable. You heard what Barbara said earlier about the second son who feels a little peeved that this misbehaving son gets all the fun. It's a much more elaborate parable than Johnson's poem presents, but I'm going to stick with what he said and only certain parts of it, because it's such a long story. And I want to start with a rhetorical question. I mean, you can answer it in your head, but you don't have to answer me. Are you here because you want to be here? I mean, at this moment, paying attention to this screen, listening to my voice. And I don't mean in general, I mean right now. Do you want to be here as opposed to all the other choices you have? You could be relaxing over coffee. You could be doing a crossword puzzle. You could be brunching on Eggs Benedict, or perhaps you're up north in the mountains toward Flagstaff or Payson, enjoying a bit of winter, or maybe you're out west along the west coast, hearing the ocean lap the waves, and yet you're listening to this when all of that other stuff is available to you. Objectively speaking, almost anything is more desirable than this, what I'm doing right now. Who wakes up on Sunday morning quivering with desire to sit down in front of their computer and watch untrained performers on a tiny screen? Before the pandemic, plenty of church experts were saying that the key to church growth was to make it more exciting, more interesting. Polish up your presentation, we were told as preachers. Keep it short, memorize it, which I've never been able to do. Use graphics like a TED Talk, say. See, maybe I'll have an example. That's what I mean, the greatest TED Talk. Wouldn't it be better if the preacher could look like that, an open shirt, and have every word known in advance? Or maybe we could jazz up the music program in a whole different way. Here's another example you might think might be true. in a certain church. Let's see what that looks like. I think Blake can pull that up for me. There you go. Maybe if we had a band that looked like that, aren't they exciting? It's kind of like being at a concert. If church were more alluring, they say, more like what we see on TV or at a concert, people would want to come. And then you'd kind of slip in a message along the way and you'd get greater market share and things. But you see, that only underscores my point. I am no TED talker. That's obvious to anyone. Katie is no Taylor Swift. As good as she is, I don't see her getting any contract like that any too soon. Although that was a very cool song, by the way, Katie. So when we try to do something people want, we fail. But if we try to give them something they need, it's because we realize, and here's a giggle, this is what that Mick Jagger was right all along. You can't always get what you want, but you might get what you need. What else could it be? Despite our best attempt to strain your ears, to tax your eyes, to overdo your patience, you still show up because there's something you need here. Whether you know the word or not, whether you can even understand it yourself, you kind of need to be here. And if you belong to any spiritual community, if you belong to this one, it means you need the faith that's in that community. Or if you're not a member and you're visiting with us, you might be saying, is this the kind of faith I need to get through life? Not want, need. If you are here, it is because you are wise enough at some level to know you have needs that are greater than food, conversation, entertainment. You stand in need of, well, for lack of a better term, spiritual nourishment, sunflower of the soul. And that's where I want to go. Now, if someone were to ask you what our liberal religion was about, there are plenty of us who would answer and say something about freedom of choice and individuality, and you can find your own path, and this is all true. Not dissing announcement. That we do not, though, by contrast, need gods or saviors or sacred books. And yet there is no doubt that we religious liberals are human beings who stand in need like everyone else on the planet. And unless we claim to be some sort of superior human, the fact that you're here says you have needs that would be called spiritual, even if you wouldn't call them that. What is it, though, that we need spiritually that we cannot supply with a cup of coffee or a croissant or a crossword puzzle or sitting by the beach? In our gut, if we are really honest with each other, we know that even liberal religion is not about independence, but about dependence. Nearly 200 years ago, a theologian we all had to study in seminary with the preposterously Germanic name Friedrich Schleiermacher, yes, that is his actual name, started the liberal religious movement in Europe with his observation that religion is the feeling of absolute dependence. There's his picture. And out of his observation came a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations or more of theological advance in Europe. Now, we self-sufficient, individualistic liberals often forget that we too are dependent beings. We are like the fellow in the fancy car cruising down the highway, thinking everybody's admiring him as he goes by in his Maserati or his Ferrari or whatever it is, and then gets a flat tire. And that person's going to need the same jack and the same help that anybody in any other car would need. He's just as dependent in his luxury car as anybody else on the road. So no matter how rugged the individualist, no matter how prosperous a person might feel they are, no matter how much power and wealth, at some level, they are still dependent. And the problem we have spiritually, everyone, including us, is that we forget we are dependent beings. In theology, we call this hubris, which sounds like pride and vanity, but it's more forgetting our dependence. I wonder if this is some leftover from our toddler days, when every child defiantly proclaims to its parents, I can do it by myself. And isn't it exciting when they try to do that and they learn to walk and talk, when they want to learn things and they won't let us show them how they're going to become their own person. Self-mastery is part of growing up. But as a fellow once wrote, maybe you've heard of this guy, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned like a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. And I wonder if hubris, that need to be self-sufficient, to be independent, is it really at some level a kind of childishness we never really outgrew? And I'm wondering, why is that? More likely, or most likely to me, at least it's my opinion, because when we need, we feel weak. We feel like a child. And we don't like that feeling when we're grown-ups. Being self-reliant feels grown up. It feels strong. We feel capable. And yet, if we are always in need, because that's the human condition, that makes us kind of delusional in a way, doesn't it? Hubris or not, sin or not, believing we are not in need, not dependent, is actually what makes us spiritually weaker. Consider now those who have lived in constant need because they don't have the safety, the liberty, the individuality that we prize. Perhaps they're poor, perhaps they're people of color, perhaps they're women, perhaps they're LGBTQ, perhaps they're a minority in whatever community they are, perhaps they're old, they could be young. People in those circumstances find strength in their dependence. The kids, they take care of each other. The elders, they take care of each other. Communities of color rally around each other, whether it's through their churches or in their neighborhoods. Wherever it is that people don't have the luxury of thinking themselves independent, they find strength in their dependence. I love this passage that comes from one of my favorite movies, my all-time favorite movie, Moonstruck, which comes from the neighborhood we used to live in. This is a great example of what strength from dependence is like. Can you cue that up for me, Blake?
Johnny Camerari.
Loretta? Ronnie. Have you come to make peace with me?
Yes. You mean I want to?
Oh, Ronnie, of course I want to.
But Johnny, I mean, your mother was dying. How did she recover?
I told my mother we were to be married, and she got well right away.
I'm sure she did.
It was a miracle.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Johnny, I have something that I have to tell you.
And I have something to tell you, but I must talk to you alone.
No, I need my family around me now.
Loretta, I can't marry you.
I need my family around me now. Have you ever felt that way? Sometimes, if you come from a difficult family, that's the thing you want and you can't have. But I love that. I need my family around me now. Strength by connecting to other people. And you only do that when you need that strength, when you sense you need that connection. This is what came to me. And I've taken a long time to get here. This is what came to me as I pondered James Weldon Johnson's poem on the prodigal son. It is a story of false independence. In the context of Johnson's world, to survive in that America then was to find the strength to wrest civil rights from a complacent white culture. They had to depend on their dependence. Churches, especially, became the means to surviving and growing and resisting. Black folk in America didn't generally read German theology in their Sunday school class, but they know the truth of it, and they still do. Religion is always about dependence, spiritually, yes, but also on each other. A famous spiritual says it all: I'm standing in the need of prayer. Something Johnson evokes in his poem, Standing in Need. This title of my sermon, Standing in Need, which connotes being there alone. I'm by myself. I need someone. To survive this precarious life, you have to feel that sense of needing connection. Needing it, not wanting it, depending on it when you don't have it. Now, that may sound like I'm saying we liberals need to pray. You might be thinking, well, geez, I didn't join this church to hear that talk. I came to be free of that, so I wouldn't have to think about that and do that. Well, I'm not going to do it. That's not the point. But of course, I've told you more than once that you can never be sure what I'm going to talk about when I stand up. You knew you were going to have a tough time when you hired me. Young man, says James Weldon Johnson, your arm's too short to box with God. And that's good advice no matter who you are. We cannot wrestle the universe to the ground. We cannot shape time to our plans. We cannot align the planets to go the way we want. We live in a dependent world. And that's why the story starts that way. And that's the context of the story. You know the story. The son is like everyone else. Whoever thought they were independent and strong. Anyone who ever wanted to be free of parental control, free of this, of everything else, whoever wanted to be independent, to be on an adventure, oh, get on your motorcycle and take off. Why not? Free as the wind. But of course, every story ends up the way this story turns up. Whether it's in Babylon or some other place, you fall down when you discover you cannot control the world. A little later on, we see where the stubborn pride lands. Young man, you can never be alone in Babylon. You can never find a place to go down on your knees and talk with your God in Babylon. I truly struggled with this message when I first delivered it 25 years ago. And I've given it many times since. This poem keeps coming back to me and demanding I pay attention, even as I wrestle with it and disagree with it. Because the idea of prayer, the way we've been taught it, is at war with rational, sensible, liberal, practical religion. The notion that we should converse with a deity is the very antithesis of what we hold dear. But is that because we are rational and sensible and mature? Or because we don't like the idea of being fallible and frail and needy? Is prayer a synonym for those too weak to stand up for themselves? Or are we the ones too weak to admit our weakness? When Johnson says, get down on your knees and talk to God, he is essentially saying, admit that you're not omnipotent, that you're not God, that you have needs and depend on people and things more than yourself. And that's what the young man did. he went home. The fact that you're here today is de facto silent confession that you know you don't have it all, that you're not that strong, that you're not that independent, that you're not that free, and that this busy Babylon of a world we live in, and it will tell us 100 ways that we can distract ourselves and ignore the difficulty, that all of us have a case of a spiritual attention deficit disorder. We would all rather do anything else than attend to that. Oh, look, I can do my taxes. Oh, I should probably go to the store. Heavens, I need to go to work. The laundry needs to be done. And what this poem is saying, stop. Look around. Listen. Accept who you are in this world. Does that mean we have to abandon reason, sense, facts, science, doubt? No. It has nothing to do with beliefs. I would say that most people who actually spend time praying are not really praying at all. They have an extended wish list from a mysterious God that they hope will fill in the gaps in their lives. They say all the words and they may even mean them, but they believe that they're fine. Just need a little help to get over the little bits that are left. They do not understand those ritual prayers, that prayer itself has nothing to say to the fortunate, has nothing to do with beliefs. That old adversary, Paul, whom I mentioned earlier, said, "For we do not know how to pray as we ought to pray, but that the very Spirit intercedes with groans too deep for words." Sometimes the deepest prayers are not words at all, but groans, sobs, silences, when we have run out of excuses for why we have not attended to our soul. Prayer is when you realize you are not in control even of your own life and that you need more. When you admit your dependence, if only to yourself. When you listen to that feeling, that's praying. It's not easy. Most people want their prayer or meditation to make them feel good. They want peace and serenity and that cloudy, dreamy experience that Sigmund Freud called the oceanic feeling. And it's a great feeling. Been there, done that. Love to do it again. But that's not prayer. Prayer is always a cry of need. It is so hard that we can only really do it alone. And remember, you can never be alone in Babylon. So you must know your aloneness to feel the dependence. The neediness can only appear when you're by yourself, even in a crowd. My favorite philosopher, Alfred North Whitehead, defined religion as what a person does with their own solitariness, their aloneness. Paradoxically, and all true religion is paradoxical, we learn how alone and needy we are from others best. We are part of a community of solitary people, which sounds ironic. How can that possibly be? But let me put it this way. If you're here, you are not telling each other what you already know, that every one of you is in need. It is a community of need. Like those in recovery groups whose first step is admitting their helplessness, we need to be in a place where we are safe enough to face the neediness that we don't believe the world will let us admit. Perhaps these halting words of mine will help one or two of you to admit, I am not in charge. I'm helpless in this world. I can't fix my life. I feel broken and inadequate. And I'll tell you that only because I am like that. Every Sunday, I stand up wherever I am in this dopey little room with this tiny little camera, reaching through the electrons, hoping you will perceive my neediness, my aloneness, and you will feel it too. Because the company of need is where we find the strength to be whole. This place, this community, is the fellowship of need, of dependence, of loss, of struggle, of sorrow. George Eliot, the great author whose name was Mary Ann Hayward, was speaking of grief when she said this: we feel our sorrow as a solemn initiation. Think about that. Our sorrow is a solemn initiation, preparing us for that sense of loving fellowship, which I think no one who has tasted it will deny is the blessedness of our life. It is our sorrow that opens the door to dependence, and dependence to connection, and connection to communion, and communion to community. The true basis of human fellowship is not one united by strong minds, not one united by like minds, but one united by broken hearts. A teacher once told me that a pastor's job is to do three things: find the pain, touch it gently, and give it a name. Well, I don't know if I did that today, but you've come here hoping for a moment when you can have your neediness touched, named, and treasured. It can be in the sermon, it can be in a hymn, it could be anywhere. But you need that at least once a week, where you cease to be you. Well, all this is what it means to pray, to make that frank admission to yourself that you stand in need. True prayer is not about revealing the divine, but revealing the human. And as George Eliot observed, when I admit my need, I am moved to accept the needs of others. The further in you go to your own neediness, the further you can reach into the neediness of others. And that is the power of prayer. The words don't matter. They're not even necessary. It is an attitude of soul that we must relearn every week, because Babylon is always distracting us from this crucial, elemental fact. It is anything that opens a stubborn or angry or fearful heart. That's what prayer is. And once that door is open, once you admit you need, something rushes in. And when that happens, love pours out. And that's why you're here. For opening your heart, the inrushing of the Spirit and the outrushing of love. I grew up saying that ours was the church of the free spirit, which itself comes from a biblical passage that says the Spirit bloweth where it listeth, but it cannot make any of us free unless our needy and dependent hearts are open to that breeze, that wind, that inrushing. If we close off our lives for fear that our neediness might be seen, we close off the Spirit itself. So yes, we have to learn to pray, which means to stand in need. which means to come to ourselves so that the Holy Spirit, whatever that might be, truly will fill your heart and carry you all your days. The bad news is we'll never get it right. The good news is we might get a little better every week. With gratitude for you to allow me to share these words and thoughts with you, and with hope that they found profit or wisdom in your life, I'll say amen. Katie.
Thank you, Reverend Fred. I was inspired by your talk to share this painting behind me. It is a painting that my husband did, Andrew, and he titled it Joy. And I've pondered upon this painting in my house many, many times. But today, thank you, Reverend Fred, I will see community in it. Just as the sunflower needs the sun, we need each other. So please enjoy this last song by our virtual choir titled Nothing More.
To be humble, to be kind, it is the giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend, to give in such a way that has no end. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are one, we are how we treat each other and nothing more. And to be bold, to be brave, it is the thinking that the heart can still be saved, and the darkness can come quick. The danger's in the anger and the hang on to it. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are one, we are how we treat each other and nothing more. And everyone is such a sea, a world that's full of endless possibilities. And heroes don't look like they used to, they look like you.
That was perhaps the coolest song I've heard in weeks. Excellent work. And I love how it dovetails into where we've been all hour. And to add these words by James Baldwin before we extinguish the chalice. James Baldwin, that great writer, said, "For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it must always be heard. There isn't any other tale to tell. It's the only light we've got in all this darkness." Ain't that the truth? Barbara, would you bring our worship to a close by extinguishing the chalice?
Yes. So if you lit your chalice, feel free to extinguish it now and join me as we say our extinguishing words. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again. Now, at this time, feel free to stay for a breakout room chat. Simply accept the breakout room invitation when it appears. Alternatively, you can chat with Reverend Wooden and Nancy by declining the breakout room invitation and just staying in the main meeting. As a reminder, the conversation prompt is, when you are in spiritual need, is there something you depend on? Thank you so much for joining us this morning.